I'm Carson Horn, and it's time for another edition of Talkin' Toomers, where I break down the latest happenings in Auburn athletics. Let's get rolling. Here we are again. It's another Auburn game week. Yes, Auburn football will be back this Saturday. Whether you and I are ready for it or not, it is coming. Auburn will face off against Georgia in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Look, it's going to be a fun game. It's exciting. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also a little bit nervous. Yes, we will break it down on this week's edition of Talkin' Toomers. If you're watching on YouTube, or maybe even if you're listening on a podcast, you probably are noticing that things look a little bit different. I'm not in studio, so I do apologize if the audio and video quality is not as good as usual. Hopefully, the content quality won't be any worse than it is usually. Still put in the same time and effort into preparation as I always do. Just had some things going on, so I wasn't able to get into studio this week to record. But still going to try to deliver what might be a shorter episode, but still going to try to deliver a preview of the Georgia game and also touch on a few things regarding Auburn basketball as well towards the end of the show. So thank you all for watching or listening wherever you are. I greatly appreciate it. It means a lot. Again, things are getting a little bit hectic. I'll give an update on the show here soon when I can. Some things are going on behind the scenes, and I'll have more in the coming weeks, hopefully, to update you on. But for today, let's get into the preview of Auburn versus Georgia, Deep South's oldest rivalry. Look, things haven't gone well for Auburn in this rivalry in the last really 20 years. I mean, you go back to the early 2000s. Mark Richt had a tremendous record against Auburn. Auburn has struggled against Alabama, absolutely, but Auburn has actually had a lot more success against Alabama than they have against Georgia. Mark Richt really, as I mentioned, had a lot of success throughout my early childhood and in the 2000s, and then Kirby Smart just continued that. Gus Malzahn struggled against Georgia. Brian Harsin did not beat Georgia. He freezes yet to beat Georgia while at Auburn. It's just been a struggle. It's been a struggle for Auburn fans. The last win in this series for Auburn came in 2017. Auburn beat Georgia in the regular season, and then Auburn ended up losing to Georgia in the SEC championship game that year. But since then, Auburn has not beaten Georgia. So it's been a tough go of things. However, on a positive side, Auburn has played competitive games against Georgia in Jordan-Hare. Auburn lost by one score against Georgia 2 years ago in 2019. I think Auburn lost by one score. Games on the road haven't gone as well for Auburn, but Auburn has been competitive at home in these games, so that's some optimism. The line as of Sunday opened up at 4.5. I was surprised. According to FanDuel Sportsbook, it opened up at 4.5. I don't imagine it's going to stay that way for very long, but that gives you an idea of what at least Vegas is thinking about this game and thinking that, hey, it could be closer than people expect. And I'll have some thoughts on that here in just a second. But let's look at this Georgia team. This Georgia team is 4-1. They're coming off a win against Kentucky on this past Saturday. Kentucky had opportunities early in that game. I thought Kentucky's game plan was pretty solid. They struggled defensively, though, to slow down Georgia's offense. They couldn't make the most of their opportunities offensively in this game, and Georgia ends up winning it. Of course, Georgia lost the game 2 weeks ago to Alabama at home, and what was another classic game in that series history there. And this is a good Georgia team as always. They're well coached as always. As far as their key players go, starts with their quarterback Gunnar Stockton in his first year as a full-time starter. He backed up Carson Beck last year, came in the SEC championship game, and of course with their quarterback for the college football playoff. He has over 1,000 yards passing this year, 69% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns and 1 interception, along with 194 yards rushing. He is a pretty mobile and pretty athletic quarterback. They have the receiver core this year is probably where their biggest improvement offensively is compared to the last several years. They brought in multiple transfers. Colby Young is leading them with 247 yards receiving. Zachariah Branch from USC transfer has 234 yards receiving. Both those guys are talented and are good athletes. So their receiver room is improved, I think, considerably from the past couple of years. Also wanted to mention Oscar Delp, their tight end. He only has 4 receptions so far this year, which is a surprise to me. I think he's one of the better tight ends in the SEC. But for whatever reason, whether it's defense is game planning for him or Georgia's just not utilizing him so far this year, I think he's a key player to circle in this game because tight ends have given Auburn issues so far this season, especially over the middle of the field with Auburn's coverage. And he is one that could exploit some weaknesses in Auburn's secondary. So he's someone that I'll be watching in this game. So while he might not flash if you're looking at just the stats so far for Georgia this season, he's someone to keep an eye on that I think could have a big game for Georgia and certainly needs to be a part of Auburn's scouting report for this one. Let's get into the matchups to watch in this game for Auburn. I'm looking at Auburn's run defense against Georgia's rushing attack. I just mentioned that Georgia had a lot of success on the ground against Kentucky this past Saturday. Auburn had its worst rushing defensive game against Texas A&M, but Auburn overall is still 8th in the country in opponents' average yards per rush, which is still really good. Auburn's still holding opponents to under 3 yards per rush on average, which is excellent. Like I said, top 10 in the country at number 8. Versus Georgia's rushing attack, though, that is 31st. So really good, not elite, but their rushing attack has been really good. They have a trio of backs. It's not just one back. Georgia rotates and really has it's more than, really they run 4 guys. Now, about 2 of them get the most carries, but they will rotate through guys. They're going to keep their running backs fresh. All of them are talented. Each of them possesses a different skill set. As for the guy who's most impressive to me, that's the sophomore Nate Frazier. I think he's the most physical and tough to tackle, but they're going to rotate through a couple different backs in this game. So I am interested to see, can Auburn's defensive line continue to slow down the rushing attack of Georgia? And then on the flip side, how is Auburn's rushing attack against Georgia's defense? Auburn's rushing attack has been good when Auburn uses it. The thing is, we know that Auburn has gone away from the running game, so this is assuming Auburn doesn't abandon the run in this game and assuming Auburn tries to establish the run in this game. If they do that, how does this matchup go? Georgia's 18th in the country in rush defense. They've been very, very solid. Alabama struggled to run against them. Kentucky struggled to run against them. Although Kentucky found some success at times in this game, they couldn't do it consistently. So this will be another key matchup to watch. Can Auburn find success running the ball against this Georgia defense? And then finally, the red zone. So Auburn is still 100% in the red zone. Now, in the last couple games, Auburn hasn't punched it into the end zone as well, but they've still been getting points. So how does Auburn fare in the red zone against Georgia's defense, which is number 14th in red zone, 114th in red zone defense so far this season? So Georgia's defense has not been very good in keeping opponents off of the scoreboard when they get into the red zone. So can Auburn not only get into the red zone and score, but can they get touchdowns in a game that could be close, in a game that's going to could come down to very small, intricate details? Can Auburn get into the end zone, get points on the board when it comes to red zone offense? That could be a determining factor here in this game. So those are 3 of the things that I am watching that could determine the outcome of this game. But besides that, I've got other questions that are going to have to be answered in this game that we should get answers to. And it starts with something I was just talking about. Will Auburn remain stubborn running the football? When you listen to Hugh Freeze talk before or after a game, it's almost like it's a different person than the person that is calling plays for Auburn. It really is confusing to listen to Hugh Freeze talk in a post-game or a press conference during the week, and then you see him call plays on Saturday. Are we sure this is the same person? Because it doesn't sound like it, because you hear Hugh Freeze in a post-game press conference, where you hear Hugh Freeze during the game week, and he's talking about, hey, we've got to keep running the ball, even if it's only for a couple yards, even if we're not breaking off big runs, we have to continue to run the ball. And Auburn fans and all of us with the podcast like myself are saying, yes, that is what we've been saying. Do that. That's what you have to do. That's the strength of your team. You have to keep running the football, even if you're not having a ton of success doing it. But then he gets into the games and you don't see that. You see Auburn abandon the run. So when Georgia gets some stops and when Auburn's only averaging a couple yards per rush, will Auburn continue to stick with it and say, look, this is our game plan? One of the things I will admire about Kentucky, I know that Georgia ended up running away with this game, but Kentucky in the first half, look, they knew that they weren't going to be able to throw the ball. Their strength is running the football, so they stuck with it, and they were able to be competitive, and they had a few opportunities to score and make that a competitive game. It just didn't happen. But that was still their best chance to win it. They knew that they weren't going to be able to win it just throwing the football. Now, Auburn is a better team than Kentucky, I think. So Auburn should have some more success than Kentucky did and should be able to do some more things differently than Kentucky did. However, the point applies to Auburn. You have to do what your strength is. You have to stick with it. You have to be stubborn. You have to dictate to Georgia what you're going to do, and you can't let them dictate to you. And Auburn, so far this season, has allowed defenses to dictate to them for the most part, except for maybe the Baylor game, what they're going to do offensively. So Auburn has to stick with it running the football. However, I would fully expect Georgia in this game to say, yeah, we're going to make you beat us throwing the football. I expect Kirby Smart to take the same game plan that Mike Elko and that Brent Venables took. Say, we're not going to be afraid of your passing game. And you know what? In the Texas A&M game, Auburn had some opportunities, had some one-on-one shots to Cam Coleman that they just weren't able to convert on. You still take those. Auburn's offense should be running the football and then taking shots down the field to your playmakers when you get those one-on-one opportunities. And I think Kirby Smart's going to give Auburn those one-on-one chances because I don't think he believes that Jackson Arnold and this Auburn offense can convert them enough in this game to where if Auburn converts one, okay, fine. But can Auburn do that consistently enough to win this game? And he's going to dare Auburn to try to keep throwing the football. So I think Auburn needs to stick to the run game despite the way Kirby Smart's going to play Auburn in this game. And he's going to try to bait them into some opportunities to throw the football into situations that might look good for the offense, but may not work out well. So I think Auburn needs to stay stubborn to the run game, even though I fully expect Kirby Smart to load out to stop the run and dare Auburn to throw the football. I think Auburn still needs to stick with the run in this game, but I am interested to see how that plays out. And then finally, I want to see Auburn's pass pro. So Auburn's really struggled in pass protection the last 2 weeks. And some of it, yeah, it is that guys aren't playing to the level they're capable of, like Xavier Chaplin, who had a really bad game against Oklahoma. But on the flip side of that, I want to see Auburn in pass protection at home because the snap count issues, I didn't think they got a lot of attention. I talked about them last week about being frustrated that Auburn didn't make the proper adjustments playing on the road with the silent snap count, so forth and so on. But what didn't get talked about enough, at least from what I saw, was how that affects you. When you're not understanding, when you can't hear the snap count, when the defender's watching the ball and they're getting off the ball faster than you are at offensive tackle, that puts you in a position where it's going to be hard for you to win that rep. So now that you're back at home, so now that the defense should not have that advantage, does your pass protection improve? I think it will. Do I think that means Auburn's going to turn into a great pass protecting offensive line? Absolutely not. But could you see some incremental improvements here? I think you could. And I'll also add, Georgia's pass rush has not been very good this year. They are 122nd, I believe it is, in sack percentage. So they don't really get after the quarterback very well. Now, would I expect them to blitz more knowing Jackson Arnold's tendencies? Absolutely. We know Jackson Arnold has held the ball too long, so I would expect Kirby Smart to be aggressive. However, I do think you could see some improvements from Auburn's offensive line in pass protection this week. If it doesn't improve this week, I have doubts that it ever will. Again, you are back home. You shouldn't have to deal with the crowd noise. You should be able to go on your normal cadence. And there should be improvement there. But I am interested to see how this game plays out there. So let's get into scenarios. How could this game play out, both positively and negatively for Auburn in this game? Let's start with the good here. I think Auburn wins this game. They stick to running the football, and they find success doing it. If Auburn sticks to running the football and they can only get 2.5 yards per rush, probably not going to be a good day. But can you stick to the running game? Can you average a little over 3 yards per rush? And then can you hit a few of those explosive plays like you missed against Texas A&M? If you can do that offensively, I think that's a recipe for success. Be stubborn running the football and take your one-on-one shots to guys like Cam Coleman when they are there. And then defensively, continue the strategy. Bend but don't break. Keep Georgia out of the end zone. I do have some slight concern with Gunnar Stockton, his ability to run. Auburn struggled a little bit against Marcel Reed, but Auburn did a pretty good job containing John Mateer in the Oklahoma game. So have to contain Gunnar Stockton and his legs as well. Keep Georgia off the scoreboard. Bend but don't break. Hold them to the field goals. Keep them out of the end zone. If Auburn's defense can continue to play like they have played in the last several weeks, and Auburn's offense can run the ball and hit a few explosive plays through the air, Auburn's going to have a chance to win this football game, assuming you don't go crazy with penalties, you don't turn the ball over. All those things will matter as well in this game. I think Auburn loses this game if, one, Auburn abandons the run like Auburn has the last few weeks under Hugh Freeze, where you're struggling to run the football and then you try to throw it and it's just not going to work. So that would be one way. Or if the run game, just like I just mentioned, gets stifled and you really just absolutely cannot get anything going running the football. And then there's also a scenario where I know if you're an Auburn fan, you're just counting on the defense continuing to bring the same type of play that they have brought the last several weeks. That may not happen again this week. They might have a bad week, and maybe Georgia's offense does go off. If that happens and Auburn gives up around high 20s or low 30s in points to Georgia, this game's over with, no matter what Auburn's offense does. Auburn's offense is not good enough to be able to score like that. So if that happens, Auburn's going to lose this game. So there's a multitude, I think, of scenarios of how this game could play out. I wouldn't be surprised if Auburn won this game. I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia blew Auburn out in this game. However, for my prediction and what I think is the most likely scenario, I think this is going to be an extremely close game, but I think Georgia wins it. I think it's going to be the same story that we've had now going on 3 years, where Auburn's going to battle, where the defense is going to play well, where Auburn offensively is going to have a chance to make plays to win the game, but they're just not going to be able to get over that hump. And I hate making this prediction because I had said pretty much all off season and into this season that I thought Auburn would lose A&M and Oklahoma, but then I thought Auburn would beat Georgia. However, I don't know how anyone could have watched Auburn football these last couple weeks and then say, you know what, they're going to go and beat Georgia. I did not anticipate the offense looking as bad as it has the last several weeks. I expect it to look somewhat better against Georgia, but will it be enough for Auburn to get the win? I just can't go there. I wish I could, but it would just be pure guesswork for me if I were to say that Auburn's going to beat Georgia in this game based on what I can see the last several weeks. I can only go off of what I've seen the last several weeks from Auburn, and it hasn't been good enough for Auburn to win this game. So yes, I do think Auburn will play better offensively. I just don't think it'll be enough. I think it'll be the same story where you're thinking after the game, man, here we are again, having chances to win the game. If we just hit this play here, if we just get this turnover here, if we just get this stop defensively here, we win the game. So I think it's going to be another one score, another painful loss for Auburn. Not fun for me to predict, but it's just where I'm sitting right now. I think a fast start for Auburn is super important in this game. Look, it's a night game. The environment's going to be great. It's Cam Newton's retirement, jersey retirement ceremony is going to happen at some point. I don't know if it's going to be before the game or during the game, but that's going to happen. It's going to be a great, exciting environment. The light show, I'm sure, will be great. But Auburn has to start this game fast, because if they don't, people are already on edge. They know what has happened last couple weeks with Auburn's loss at Oklahoma and at Texas A&M. So fans will check out in a heartbeat. They'll be excited. They'll be fired up at the start. But if Georgia goes down and they go up 7-0 real quickly in this game, the offense gets the ball to start the game and they go 3 and out, and then Georgia scores, fans are going to check out like that because they're already on edge. So a fast start is so important. Auburn needs to play with the lead in this game. If they can do that, the fans will stay in it, and this will be a hostile environment throughout. But Auburn has to create momentum because, again, fans are already teetering. We know that. We talked about that last week. Auburn fans are rightly frustrated and angry. They'll get excited. They'll be up. They'll be high energy for this game. But it could go away in a heartbeat if things go south quickly. So Auburn is an imperative for Auburn to have a fast start in this game against Georgia to keep the crowd, keep the fan base energized into this game, and to give Auburn a chance to win it. But I just have to go with Georgia in this game, unfortunately, just because of what I've seen the last couple weeks. You can hate on me for changing my predictions. It is what it is. I think if you were in my shoes here, that you would be doing the same based on what we've seen from Auburn's offense. And Hugh Freeze, just quite frankly, over the last several years, I don't know how you can pick Auburn in this game, again, except for through pure just guesswork. But based on what we've seen, it's hard to pick Auburn in this one. Okay, I did want to hit on a few Auburn basketball notes. Auburn had their pro day last Wednesday. Stephen Pearl era is up and running now. We are about 2 weeks into the Stephen Pearl era. At this point, Auburn plays an exhibition game, not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. So maybe you're listening to this episode or watching this episode on Wednesday. It would be a week from that day. I think it's October 14th that Auburn faces off against Oklahoma State in Birmingham Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. So we're really close to seeing this Auburn team in action, even if it is just an exhibition game. But the pro day, all indications are it went well. Stephen Pearl spoke to the media after pro day. I had a few things I wanted to comment on from that. Of course, the biggest news from that was that Stephen Pearl announced everyone is coming back. I said on last week's show that my gut told me that would be the case, that everyone would come back. I thought because of the staff retention, because I did believe, and I still do believe, that the players are fans of Stephen Pearl, that this team, these players would stay bought in, and that they would all stay on this team and would not look to leave. However, it didn't mean that other teams weren't going to try and teams weren't going to come after Auburn's players. They did that, but Auburn was able to get those guys back. Again, technically the window is still open, but it seems all indications are things are trending well based on Stephen Pearl's announcement. They're fully expecting everyone to be back at this point. Tahai Pettiford and Keyshawn Hall were the two that people had their eye on the most. Those are arguably Auburn's two best players, or at least expected to be Auburn's two best players this upcoming season. So as you would expect, teams were after those two guys. But those two guys will be back for Auburn this season and leading this team. So that was big news, and that's the first win, I guess you could call it, of the Stephen Pearl era, just being able to retain this roster. As far as a couple injury updates, Auburn centers and Keyshawn Murphy and Emeka Oporum are both banged up. Keyshawn Murphy just got cleared for full activity. He did participate fully in Auburn's pro day. Emeka Oporum, the transfer center from JUCO, he was held out of the pro day, but Stephen Pearl said they expect him back. Auburn is thin at center, so Auburn has options, has some small ball options with Philip Jovich at 6'8", even Sebastian Williams-Adams at 6'8", that can play that small ball 5, but Auburn really needs those two guys healthy, especially Keyshawn Murphy, because he could be one of Auburn's best defenders, will be Auburn's best defenders. Auburn needs him healthy, so they have to be careful with him and with Felix Oporum, as well, the 7'1" backup center this year for Auburn. But I also wanted to comment on a few guys that Stephen Pearl said he thought was standing out. And just in case you missed it, maybe you missed last week's episode, before I get into that, just wanted to note my full basketball season preview with predictions and everything was in last week's show. It's in the back half of last week's show. So if you did miss that, make sure you go check that out, because if you were expecting to hear that here, you're not going to. So make sure to go check that out if you haven't already. But Stephen Pearl did have a comment on a few guys that were standing out. He talked about everyone on the roster, but he specifically pointed out true freshmen Sebastian Williams-Adams and Elijah Freeman as two guys standing out so far for Auburn. I would say Sebastian Williams-Adams is the biggest surprise to me. He was a 4-star high school recruit. He's a true freshman. I saw him as someone who was going to have minutes this year, but was probably going to need to develop a little bit, probably wasn't going to play a key role. Right now, that doesn't seem to be the case. It looks like he is going to have a very important role for Auburn. It seems like he's defending well. He does the small things well. He rebounds well. And he's shooting the ball a lot better. He's shooting around 40% from 3, according to Stephen Pearl this fall, whereas he was shooting around 20% during the summer. So maybe he's just been hot this fall. That's certainly a possibility. But maybe he has improved and put in the work to improve offensively. That was the question with him. The thought was he'll come in, he'll be a good defender, he's going to have to develop offensively, and he still needs to. He's not there yet, of course, he's still just a true freshman. But if he is further along offensively than maybe Auburn coaches and even fans expected, that's a big deal for Auburn. He could play himself into a pretty important role playing the 3 or the 4 position for Auburn this season. And then Elijah Freeman. So this was a guy that had a lot of hype around him. The number 1 player in Division II, was a phenomenal scorer last year at Division II level. But he came in and you wonder, okay, how's it going to translate? We know with Chaney Johnson, it took him some time. It really took him through year 1 before it really translated to playing in the SEC with the physicality and the speed. And for the first little bit when Elijah Freeman came in, it did sound like he was having some of the same issues, same struggles with evolving and adapting to the speed and the effort and intensity of the SEC. But it seems like Elijah Freeman did really, really well in Auburn's pro day, and according to Stephen Pearl, he has made some massive improvements. And he, according to Stephen Pearl, is a key to Auburn's winning this year. Him and Sebastian Williams-Adams, they are winners, and he's going to play an important role. If he gets close to reaching his ceiling and his full potential this year, that is massive for Auburn, because he has probably the highest ceiling of anyone on this Auburn roster. He has probably the highest NBA ceiling, even higher than Tahai Pettiford on this roster. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying he's better than Tahai Pettiford or will be better than him. I'm talking about pure potential. Because of his size, his length, his athleticism, the potential is there to be an NBA player one day. So if he's starting to tap into that and his offense continues to evolve and he figures out how to defend with his length and his size, I can understand why Stephen Pearl's super high on him. And I didn't think he could start based on during the summer. I now think a little bit differently about that. I certainly think you could see him starting in that Oklahoma State game and into this season for Auburn. As far as other takeaways, just based off of the pro day and what Stephen Pearl said in his press conference after, it does seem like the offense is flowing really well. Auburn shooting as a team over 40% from three. And that's excellent. Said on the preview, I expect this Auburn team to be very good offensively, and signs are so far that is going to be the case. However, that could also mean Auburn's defense is just really bad because they are playing against each other. Usually it's somewhere in the middle. I don't expect Auburn's defense to be great this year. I do expect them to play with high energy and high effort. But as we've said, as I've said and others have said, if we've said it one time, we've said it 100, this team's going to be similar to your 2018, 2019 Auburn teams. They're going to play fast. They're going to score a lot of points, going to shoot a lot of threes. May not be the best defensively, but they'll play with high effort. They'll look to turn teams over and get out in transition. So, can you make incremental improvements defensively throughout the year? That's something to watch. I know Stephen Pearl, being a defensive guy, he'll get the most out of this roster on the defensive end, whatever that might be. He'll get the most out of them, but they're probably still going to have to improve as the year goes on. And that doesn't mean the offense can't improve as well. I think it certainly can. As again, we're still talking about a team with only one returning player. This is, yet again, a team that should improve and should get better as the season goes on, as they get more comfortable playing with one another. Another thing I took away is that this is going to continue to be a big rotation. So one question I have was, Bruce Pearl was big on playing a lot of guys. A couple of reasons. One, he thought he had a roster that didn't necessarily separate itself. Its stars didn't necessarily separate themselves from the rest of the guys. That was different last year. Really, Auburn's rotation got trimmed down to about 7, 8 guys because there was separation between the top and the bottom. This year, I think you're going to have more of a traditional Bruce Pearl team where the talent's going to be about similar throughout. There may not be a big difference. I could be wrong on that, but right now that's how it kind of looks. And right now, it seems that Stephen Pearl is expecting to play a bigger rotation. For number two, the second reason is because you can typically get more out of your guys on the defensive end. If they're not playing 35 minutes per game, they can give you more. They're not going to be exhausted, so that's another big reason and positive reason to play those guys, play more guys. So it looks like it could be a bigger rotation, but of course that could get trimmed down if other guys are just too good to keep off the court, or if some guys just aren't cutting it, aren't playing well enough. But those are a few takeaways real quick that I had from Pro Day and from Stephen Pearl's press conference. I'll have a little bit more next week before we get into this, of things I'll be watching in the exhibition game against Oklahoma State. So I'll have more on Auburn basketball next week. The first true game of the season is November 3rd. So we are a month away now, less than a month away from Auburn's first true game. But we get to see Auburn basketball in just over a week. So I am super excited. So from here on out, the shows are going to be loaded. We're going to have Auburn basketball content. We're going to have Auburn football content. It's going to be a lot. But I know Auburn fans are excited about the Stephen Pearl era and looking forward to getting it going. And especially if football goes off the rails a little bit, we'll probably spend even more time on Auburn basketball for the sake of all of our mental health here on the show. But a shorter show today because of the circumstances, because of not being able to record like typically in studio. Again, bear with me. Should have some updates coming on that in the near future. But I really appreciate you watching or listening. If you haven't already, I ask for you, please like and subscribe to the show. It will mean a ton. And again, thank you for dealing with the lesser quality of audio and video. Again, I hope the content quality was just as good or just as bad as usual, however you view it. But I really appreciate you listening. Hopefully we'll be back with a more typical and normal edition of Talkin' Toomers next week. Thank you for listening to Talkin' Toomers. If you liked what you heard, make sure to subscribe and follow @Talkin' Toomers on social media so you'll never miss an episode. War Eagle.